Okay, so today we're going to tie a foam grasshopper, one of my favorite grasshopper patterns. I like to fish with it. It's easy to fish with, easy to cast, and relatively easy to tie, so I can tie a lot of them in a short amount of time. So to start off with, I'm going to use get my thread attached to the hook. Notice the thread is not black. I do most of my flies in black, but this one I like to use a thread that's a little bit more similar to the actual color of the pattern that I'm tying. So I'm going to get my thread attached to the hook, get it back here to the back of the hook just like that. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a small strip of tan foam. This is the tan foam that I'm using. And usually I just use scissors. I cut it off of a large piece of it. If you have foam cutters are nice because they can cut you a little bit straighter line. So, okay, so I'm going to tie my foam in just like this. Notice I'm leaving quite a bit out front here. We're going to use that for part of our fly body. So once I have the foam fastened down a little bit, then I'm going to just work my thread forward, trying to fasten that foam a little bit to get up the front, and I just work backwards. And this doesn't have to be real pretty because you're going to cover that with some dubbing anyway, but I like to get a good thicker body for this fly. So that's really what that ends up doing. Next I'm going to use some dubbing, so I'm just going to pull a little bit of dubbing out of my little dubbing box here. And we're going to dub it onto the thread and bring that forward on this hook. So set my dubbing on here. Remember, when you're attaching dubbing to the thread, you want to generally twist in the same direction. If you twist in the same direction, it helps the dubbing fasten to the thread much better. So, okay, got our dubbing on the thread. I'm just going to wrap it forward. All right, and you basically just want enough wraps and enough coverage so that it is kind of covering up that foam that you've worked with. And looks like I didn't quite have enough, so I'm just going to peel a little bit back down to here, wrap it up a little bit, and bring my thread forward. Okay. Okay, next step, I'm going to take this foam and pull it forward right over the top. I'm going to fasten it right up here at the head. Quite a few wraps, get it nice and tight there. And I'm going to, actually we won't be snipping that off quite yet. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the leftover foam down and kind of push it into the eye a little bit. When I do that, you notice it gives it a little bit of an indentation right there. That tells me exactly where I'm going to place my needle nose scissors, run a hole through it, then I can run that right through the eyelet just like that. Wrap the foam underneath the hook, and then we'll tie it off. So the size of the hook that I'm using right here is a size 8 2x long dry fly. You can tie it in any size you would like. This is about the size that I prefer. Sometimes I actually go a little bit bigger when I'm tying hopper flies. So, okay, next step, we're going to tie in some elk hair. So just got my patch of elk hair here, and we're going to take and cut a little bit of a pinch off of that. Not a lot, you don't need a lot. Primarily the elk hair, at least for the purposes that I tie this fly for, I use it so that it actually can act as almost like veins on an arrow. When you cast this thing, it helps the fly right itself on the water a lot better, because when it settles, the elk hair makes this part of the fly sit to the top. So a lot of times on elk hair, you'll get that fuzzy stuff that's in there. I like to clear that out. Once you clear that stuff out, that helps the elk hair get fastened to the hook a lot better. Once I do that, then I'm going to put the elk hair in the hair stacker, Make sure I get all those tips the same length. So place that in the hair stacker. Maybe 10 or 15 here. Pull it out. Got a nice even edge, it looks like. Place that elk hair right on this fly. Get situated about where I want it. I like to have the elk hair stick about back to the even, or maybe just barely past the bend in the hook. And then once I know I have it where I want it, hold it in my left hand and then get some good wraps here. What I like to do is my first wrap, sometimes it's easy to break the thread on this, but I like to get my first wrap loose. And then once I get around it, I kind of pull on it a little bit, make sure it's nice and tight, and then get quite a few successive wraps in. Now to get that elk hair to tighten down nicely, you want to make sure that your wraps are not overlapping over the top of themselves, because that really does not help tighten the thread onto the elk hair. You want every wrap to be just right next to the other one and maybe work either backward or forward on the fly. On this one, I'm working backward a little bit. And the last couple of wraps are over the top of the other ones. And call that good. So this is the stuff I want, this is the stuff I don't want, so I'm going to kind of pinch all that in my fingers here. Snip it right down at the base, as far down as I can get it. Okay, the next step, I like to tie in a couple rubber legs. And the rubber legs I prefer to use when fishing with hoppers, they're black. So if you notice these rubber legs here, there's two of them actually. And I like to leave them attached together when I tie it onto the fly. You'll see why here in a second. Once I get it on there, maybe 3 somewhat soft wraps so that this thing can move. And then I take my scissors and I'm going to put those scissors right through that where the 2 pieces of rubber legs are. Pull it up. That way I got 2 strands, grab each strand, pull them to the side of the hook, and we've got them right where I want them. Now that they're there, remember I only had 3 soft wraps, so now my wraps are going to get a little bit tighter. Kind of fasten those legs down a little bit. Make sure they're going to hold there so they don't start twisting on the fly when I'm casting and catching fish with it. Okay. And the last thing I like to do on these flies is I like to put a little bit of a topper on it. When I say a topper, just a little, I put a little yellow topper. Just helps me see the fly sometimes in lower visibility and distinguish it from other things that might be on the water. So put this little topper on there, and actually before I cut that topper, I prefer to whip finish it. So now I'm going to whip finish this fly. Keep everything out of the way. Get a good whip finish on it. Topper's a little long. If you leave your topper long like that, when you go to cast it, that thing really is going to catch the wind and make it more difficult to cast. So I like to make my topper fairly low profile, but I like to have that contrast in color, something a little brighter so that I can see it. So there is a nice foam grasshopper, relatively easy tie, quick, stays together very well when you're fishing with it, and catch a lot of fish with it. There it is, grasshopper, foam grasshopper.